Why did Jesus curse a fig tree for not having fruit when it was not even the season for figs? That is the question people ask about Mark 11, and it seems unfair. Why curse something for not producing fruit outside its harvest time? It makes no sense, unless you understand what Jesus is actually doing. This is not about a literal fig tree. This is about Hebrew wordplay revealing what was already true. And once you see the language layer, everything opens up. Mark 11 verses 12 through 14. On the morrow when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree afar off having leaves, he came if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of figs was not yet. And Jesus answered and said unto it, No man eat fruit of the hereafter forever. Now look at the structure of this passage. Verse 12 through 14. Jesus curses the fig tree. Verse 15 through 19. Jesus cleanses the temple. Verse 20 through 21. The fig tree is withered. The fig tree story surrounds the temple cleansing. That is intentional. That is a sandwich structure. The fig tree is the temple. The fig tree is Israel's religious system. Now watch the wordplay. Jesus sees the fig tree afar off having leaves. The Hebrew word for leaves is Aleh. The root word for aleph is alah, which means to ascend, to go up, to be lifted up. So when Jesus sees a fig tree having Aleh, having leaves, he is seeing something that appears lifted up, something that appears elevated. Israel looked lifted up from a distance. The temple, the priesthood, the sacrifices, the law, the religious system, from afar it appeared elevated. It appeared blessed. It appeared alive. But Jesus comes close to inspect, and here is what matters. The Hebrew word for fruit is Peri. When something is lifted up, when worship ascends to God, there should be Peri, fruit. Throughout Scripture, sacrifices are lifted up as a pleasing aroma to God. That is the language of Leviticus. Genesis 8 verse 21. The smoke ascends. The prayers go up. And where worship truly ascends, there should be fruit, righteousness, justice, mercy, faithfulness. That is the natural result. So when Jesus sees Aleh, leaves, lifted up appearance, he expects Peri, fruit. That is how it is supposed to work. Lifted up worship should produce fruit. But when Jesus inspects, he finds nothing but leaves, no fruit, just the appearance of being lifted up, just Aleh without Peri. And then Jesus goes to the temple. Mark 11 verses 15 through 17. Jesus went into the temple and began to cast out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and would not suffer that any man should carry any vessel through the temple. And he taught, saying unto them, Is it not written, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer? But ye have made it a den of thieves. Watch what is happening. People needed to buy animals to sacrifice. That was necessary for worship. But the sellers were making business off it, overcharging, exploiting, profiting off what should be worship freely offered to God. They turned sacrifice into commerce. They made money off people trying to worship. And Jesus says, Ye have made it a den of thieves. Now here is the wordplay. The Hebrew word for thieves or robbers is Paritsim. Paritsim. Listen to the sound. Peri. Paritsim. Almost identical. The root of Paritsim sounds like Peri. Where Peri, fruit, should be, Jesus finds Paritsim, thieves. But it was not just the money changers. The corruption went deeper. The religious leaders themselves were the thieves. Mark 12 verse 40. Jesus directly accuses the Pharisees, which devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Devour widows' houses, taking from widows, exploiting them. And then immediately after this accusation, watch what happens. Mark 12 verses 41 through 44. Jesus sat over against the treasury, and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury. And many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw into mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Look at what is happening here. The widow gives her last to mites, everything she has. But under the law, the widow had legal rights to be supported by the religious leaders. Deuteronomy 14 verse 29. The Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow shall come and shall eat and be satisfied. The religious system was supposed to care for widows. That was the law. That was the fruit that should have come from lifted up sacrifices. Peri, Matthew 23:23. Faithfulness, justice, mercy, caring for the vulnerable. but instead the Pharisees were taking from her. She is giving her last while they should be supporting her in her need. And worse, the Pharisees were making public displays of their own giving of their abundance to earn themselves praise, showing off their Aleh, their leaves, their prosperity, their appearance of being lifted up, while the widow has nothing. This is Paritsim where Peri should be, thieves where fruit should be. The temple has alah, lifted up prayers, lifted up sacrifices. But where righteousness should flow, there are leaders devouring widows' houses. The wordplay shows the substitution. What should be there versus what actually is there. The tree appeared alive from afar with its leaves, but it was dead. The temple appeared lifted up with its sacrifices, but it was full of thieves taking from the very people God commanded them to protect. Jesus did not kill the tree. He revealed what it already was. Mark 11 verses 20 through 21. In the morning as they passed by they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter calling to remembrance saith unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursedst is withered away from the roots. Peter is amazed. The tree did not just lose its leaves. It dried up thoroughly, completely dead, even to the roots. And here is where another wordplay appears. The Hebrew word for tree is etz. The Hebrew word for bone is etzem. Same root, connected. When Peter sees the tree dried up from the roots, he is looking at Etzem, dry bones. This connects directly to Ezekiel 37, the valley of dry bones. Ezekiel 37 verses 1 through 3. The hand of the Lord set me down in the midst of the valley which was full of bones, and lo, they were very dry. And he said unto me, Son of man, can these bones live? Israel had been dry Etzem for a long time, spiritually dead. For 100 years of silence between Malachi and John the Baptist. No prophet, no word. The religious system was a corpse. And Jesus verified this. Matthew 23 verse 27. Jesus called them whited sepulchres, whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men bones. They looked alive. They had Aleh, lifted up appearance, beautiful outside, but inside they were full of Etzem, dead bones. The tree had leaves showing maturity, but no fruit. The system appeared alive, but it was dead. Now watch what God said he would do about the dry bones. Ezekiel 37 verses 5 through 6. I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. And I will lay sinews upon you, and will bring up flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and ye shall live. This is the incarnation. God forming flesh in Mary's womb, laying sinews, bringing up flesh, covering with skin, putting breath, life springing forth into Israel through Jesus. Emmanuel, God with us in the flesh. The Etzem received life, but the religious system stayed dead, and Jesus spent his entire life trying to bring fruit from that dead tree. Luke 13 verses 6 through 9. A certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came and sought fruit thereon, and found none. Then said he unto the dresser of his vineyard, Behold, these 3 years I come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and find none, cut it down. And he answering said unto him, Lord, let it alone this year also, till I shall dig about it and dung it. And if it bear fruit, well, and if not, then after that thou shalt cut it down. Now watch the mathematical prophetic structure. The parable contains its own multiplication keys. 3 years in the parable. 3 times 10 equals 30 years of Jesus' life. Growing up in Israel. Going to the temple. Luke to verse 49. I must be about my Father's business. 30 years the master was watching, seeking fruit. Then the caretaker said, Give it 1 more year. 1 year in the parable. 1 times 3 equals 3 years of ministry. Matthew 15 verse 24. I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. 3 years focused absolutely only on Israel. 3 years tending the tree, seeking fruit. And what happened? They killed him. No fruit. So the parable says after that cut it down. 3 plus 1 equals 4. For total years in the parable. 4 times 10 equals 40 years to temple destruction. The parable is a mathematical prophetic code. 3 multiplies by 10 to get 30. 1 multiplies by 3 to get 3. 4 multiplies by 10 to get 40. The literal numbers in the parable unlock the actual timeline when you apply the correct multiplication factors. 3 becomes 30. 1 becomes 3. 4 becomes 40. And it happened exactly as the math revealed. Jesus died around 30 at. The tree was given 40 more years. And in 70 at exactly 40 years later the temple was destroyed. The tree was cut down, just as the parable prophesied. God compressed the prophetic timeline into simple numbers that mathematically expand to reveal the exact fulfillment. The parable is the code. The numbers are prophetic keys. The verdict: cut it down. Jesus cursed the fig tree. He made visible what was already invisible. The system was dead from the roots, and 40 years later it was physically cut down. So the tree was cut down. Mark 11 verse 14. No man eat fruit of the hereafter forever. Hereafter forever. Not temporarily, permanently, forever. That is literal prophecy, and it came true exactly as Jesus said. But before we see the fulfillment, we need to understand what the roots were. When the tree withered from the roots, it was not just the sacrificial system. The roots were the Pharisees themselves. They were the guardians of the law. They protected it. They taught it. They interpreted it. They distributed it. The Pharisees were the roots of the entire religious system, and the law itself was good. Romans 7 verse 10, the commandment which was ordained to life. The law gives life. That was its purpose, to produce Peri fruit, righteousness, justice, life. But the roots were corrupt. The Pharisees had the law that should give life, but they were devouring widows. They had what should produce Peri, but they were producing Paritsim. The roots were rotten. So when Jesus cursed the tree and it withered from the roots, he was declaring judgment on the Pharisees themselves, the guardians of the law, the foundation of the system. They were being removed, cut down, and Jesus replaced them. He became the new root. When Jesus becomes the final sacrifice on the cross, the judgment begins. The old system that was already dead from the roots is now visibly withered for all to see. Within 40 years, the temple is destroyed. In 70 AD. The sacrifices stop. The Levitical priesthood ends. The Pharisees lose their authority. The entire system dried up. And from that day to this day, no one has eaten the fruit of that system ever again. No temple sacrifices. No animal offerings. Never restored. For over 1900 years the tree has been dead. Hereafter forever. Just as Jesus said. Hebrews 8 verse 13. In that he saith a new covenant, he hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. The old covenant was already decaying, already dying, already withered, and it vanished in 70 AD. Hebrews 10 verse 18. Now where remission of these is, there is no more offering for sin. Jesus was the once for all sacrifice, the final offering. The tree dried up from the roots. The Pharisees were removed, but Jesus did not just cut down the dead tree. He replaced it. He became the new root. Romans 11 verses 16 through 18. If the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree wert grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree. Jesus became the new root. He fulfilled the law, not just completed it, filled it full, with agape. Romans 13 verse 10. Love is the fulfilling of the law. Matthew 22 verses 37 through 40. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Love God. Love neighbor. The old roots, the Pharisees, had the law that gives life, but they twisted it to steal. The new root, Jesus, fulfilled the law with agape. And now it actually produces the Peri fruit it was always supposed to produce. He is the tree, both root, branches, and fruit all in one. The old olive branches, the believing Jews, they remain grafted in. The wild olive branches, the Gentiles, they are grafted in, both integrated into him. The fig tree dried from their roots. The Pharisees were removed, but Jesus became the root. The Etzem that were dry received life through him, and he became the Etz that bears fruit. Jew and Gentile both grafted into him. This is what the Hebrew wordplay reveals. Aleh without Peri gets judged. Paritsim where Peri should be gets withered. The Etz that was dead gets cut down. The corrupt roots, the Pharisees, get removed. But Jesus becomes the new root who fulfills the law with love. And now both Jew and Gentile can bear fruit through him. That is the complete picture. That is what Jesus was showing us. The old tree was already dead. He revealed it. He cursed it. He replaced it. And now he is the tree of life. That is how the wordplay works. That is what happened in 70 AD. And that is the hope for today.